Hello and welcome back to Let's Master English. I'm your host, and it's wonderful to have you here with me today. We're going to talk about something that I believe affects almost every single person learning a new language. It's a silent battle that happens in your mind just before you try to speak, just before you hit send on an email, or even when you're just listening to a conversation. I'm talking about overthinking. Does this sound familiar? You're in a conversation, you know you want to say something, but your brain freezes. A storm of questions floods your mind. Should I use the present perfect or the past simple? Is that the right preposition? What if my accent is terrible? What if they don't understand me? What if they think I sound stupid? By the time you've analyzed every possible mistake, the moment has passed. The conversation has moved on, and you're left feeling frustrated and silent. This, my friends, is the cycle of overthinking. It's a huge barrier on the road to fluency, perhaps even bigger than vocabulary or grammar. I know this because I have been there. I have been that person in the room, silent. Not because I didn't have ideas, but because I was trapped in my own head. Today, I want to share my journey with you, how I recognize this pattern in myself, and more importantly, the practical, realistic steps I took to manage it. We'll explore why we do it and how we can learn to quiet that critical inner voice, get out of our own way, and finally start speaking with more freedom and confidence. I'll also share some inspiring stories of other learners from around the world who fought the same battle and won. So take a deep breath, relax, and let's talk about how to stop thinking and start speaking. Before we can manage something, we need to understand exactly what it is. For me, overthinking wasn't just being careful, it was a state of analysis paralysis. My brain would become so busy analyzing the language that I couldn't actually use it. It would show up in three main areas of my learning. First, and most painfully, in speaking. This is the big one. I would be in a group of people and someone would ask a question. I knew the answer, and I could even form the sentence perfectly in my head, but then the doubt would begin. It was like a little voice inside me started a checklist. Okay, grammar check, vocabulary check, pronunciation check. Is a specific pronounced sp-ci-fic or sp-ci-fic? This internal debate would take so long that I would miss my chance to speak. The worst part was that afterwards, I would feel so angry with myself. I knew what to say, but fear and over-analysis kept my mouth shut. Second, it would appear in my writing. I remember trying to write an important email in English. I must have spent an hour on just 3 sentences. I would write a sentence, then delete it. I'd rewrite it, then worry it didn't sound formal enough. I'd change a word, then wonder if another word was better. I would check the grammar online, check the vocabulary in a thesaurus, and read it out loud 10 times. The email I eventually sent was probably fine, but the amount of stress and time I spent on it was enormous. It was exhausting. Perfectionism was my enemy. Third, it even happened when I was listening. This one is sneaky. I would be listening to a podcast or watching a movie, and I'd be determined to understand every single word. As soon as I heard a word I didn't know, my brain would fixate on it. What does that word mean? I should look it up. While I was busy thinking about that one missed word, I would lose the thread of the conversation. I'd miss the next 2 or 3 sentences. My desire to understand everything perfectly meant that I actually understood less of the overall message. I want to tell you about my friend Kenji from Japan. Kenji has an amazing vocabulary and a deep understanding of English grammar from years of study. But when he joined a conversation group with native speakers, he barely said a word. I asked him about it and he said, "I know the words, but when I try to speak, my mind just goes blank. I am so worried about choosing the wrong word or making a grammar mistake that it feels safer to say nothing." Kenji's knowledge was trapped behind a wall of overthinking. This is a story I've heard from so many dedicated learners all over the world. Understanding why we get stuck in these thinking loops was a big step for me. It helped me to be kinder to myself. It's not a personal failure, it's often a natural result of the learning process itself. One of the main reasons is, quite simply, fear. It's the fear of being judged. When we speak our native language, we are confident and competent, but when we speak a new language, we feel vulnerable. We worry that people will judge our intelligence based on our language mistakes. We don't want to look foolish, so our brain's protective instinct is to say, if you don't say anything, you can't make a mistake. Another reason is how we are taught. From the very beginning, we learn English through rules. We learn grammar rules, spelling rules, and sentence structures. Our brains are trained to analyze the language and get it right. This is a useful skill for passing exams, but it can be a huge disadvantage in a fast-flowing, spontaneous conversation. You simply don't have time to consciously apply hundreds of rules every time you open your mouth. I like to use the metaphor of learning to drive a car. When you first start, you overthink everything. You consciously think, okay, check the mirror, now press the clutch, now move the gear stick, now slowly release the clutch, now press the accelerator. It's a slow, clumsy process, but with months and years of practice, you stop thinking about the individual actions. You just drive. Fluency in a language is the same. It's the point where you stop consciously thinking about the mechanics and just express your ideas. Overthinking keeps us stuck in that clumsy beginner driver phase. Okay, so we know what overthinking is and why we do it. Now for the most important part, what can we do about it? I'm going to share the techniques that personally helped me and that have helped many other learners I know to break free. 1. Embrace the good enough principle. This was a game changer for me. I had to shift my goal from perfection to communication. The primary purpose of language is to share ideas and connect with people, not to produce grammatically perfect sentences. I started telling myself, my English doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be good enough to be understood. When I was in a conversation, instead of trying to build the most beautiful, complex sentence, I would just use the simple words I knew to get my message across. Was it always elegant? Did I sometimes make mistakes? Absolutely. But was I understood? Yes. And that was a victory. This principle is incredibly liberating. It takes the pressure off and allows you to actually participate. 2. Use the 5-second rule for speaking. This is a beautifully simple but powerful trick I learned from a book by Mel Robbins. The rule is this: if you have an instinct to say something in a conversation, you must start speaking within 5 seconds. Don't give your brain a chance to start the debate. Just 5, 4 dots, 3 dots, 2 dots, 1 dot, go. The first time I tried this, I was terrified. Someone asked for opinions on a movie, and I wanted to say something. My brain immediately started its usual, "But what if?" monologue. I looked at the person, took a breath, and just said, "I thought." I didn't even know what the rest of the sentence was going to be, but by starting, I had broken the paralysis. The words came out, a bit messy and simple, but they came out. The more I practiced this, the easier it became to jump into a conversation before my overthinking mind could pull me back. 3. Learn in chunks, not single words. This is a more technical-sounding tip, but it's incredibly practical. Instead of trying to build sentences from individual word bricks, start learning and remembering phrases or chunks of language. Our brains can retrieve a chunk much faster and with less effort than constructing a sentence from scratch. For example, instead of learning the words I, look, forward, to, and hearing, you learn the entire chunk. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. When you need to end an email, you don't have to think. You just pull that complete chunk from your memory. I want to tell you about Maria from Brazil. She works for an international company and needed to improve her fluency for online meetings. She was constantly overthinking how to phrase her opinions politely. Her manager gave her some great advice. She started a notebook of business meeting chunks. She collected phrases like, "If I could just add something here." That's a great point, and I'd like to build on that. Could you clarify what you mean by? From my perspective, it looks like. By memorizing and practicing these chunks, she didn't have to invent polite sentences in the middle of a stressful meeting. She had them ready to go. This dramatically reduced her overthinking and increased her confidence. Practice extensive. Listening and reading. This directly targets the overthinking that happens when you're trying to understand everything. There are two types of reading and listening. Intensive, where you analyze every word and structure, like studying a textbook, and extensive, where you read or listen for pleasure and general understanding. To stop overthinking, you need a lot more extensive practice. I started reading graded readers, books written at my English level. I made a rule for myself. I was not allowed to stop and look up a word unless it was absolutely essential to understanding the story. I forced myself to use the context to guess the meaning. For listening, I started listening to podcasts on topics I loved, like history and science. I accepted that I would only understand maybe 70 to 80%, and that was okay. This practice trains your brain to relax. It teaches you to be comfortable with a little bit of ambiguity and to focus on the big picture, not on every single detail. This is exactly how native speakers listen. They don't hear every single word perfectly. They hear the flow and get the meaning. 5. Acknowledge the fear. Mindfulness. This might sound a bit strange, but it was incredibly helpful. Instead of fighting the feeling of fear and anxiety, I learned to acknowledge it. When I felt that familiar knot of panic in my stomach before speaking, I would take a quiet, deep breath and say to myself, "Okay, I'm feeling nervous right now. That's a normal part of learning. It's okay." By simply naming the emotion and accepting it, I took away some of its power. It stopped being this big, scary monster and just became a feeling. A friend of mine, Adama from Senegal, took this even further. He started a private journal. Before he would go to his weekly English conversation club, he would write down all his fears. "I'm afraid I will forget my words. I'm afraid they will laugh at my accent." He said that getting the fears out of his head and onto paper made them seem smaller and more manageable. It was a way of telling his brain, "I hear you, but I'm going to speak anyway." So, how does all this lead to fluency? It creates a powerful, positive cycle. When you use these strategies to manage overthinking, you start to speak more. The more you speak, the more practice you get. The more practice you get, the more your brain starts to automate the processes of grammar and vocabulary retrieval, just like driving the car. As this automation happens, you gain confidence, and as your confidence grows, your fear decreases. When your fear decreases, you overthink less. This is the path. Fluency isn't a magical destination where you suddenly know every word and never make a mistake. Fluency is the feeling of flow. It's the ability to express your thoughts and feelings without being blocked by a constant, critical inner monologue. By managing overthinking, you are not just learning a language, you are learning to get out of your own way, and that is perhaps the most important skill of all. We've covered a lot of ground today, exploring that internal battle of overthinking that so many of us face. The most important thing to remember is that you are not alone in this feeling, and it is something you can manage and overcome. Let's do a quick recap of the practical strategies we talked about. Embrace the good enough principle. Your goal is communication, not perfection. Let go of the need to be perfect. Use the 5-second rule. When you want to speak, don't hesitate. Give yourself 5 seconds and then just start. Learn in chunks. Memorize whole phrases, not just single words. This reduces the mental effort of building sentences. Practice extensive listening and reading. Get comfortable with not understanding every single word. Focus on the main idea. Acknowledge the fear. Use mindfulness to accept your nervousness without letting it control you. My challenge for you this week is to choose just one of these strategies and consciously apply it. Maybe you'll try the 5-second rule in your next English class. Or perhaps you'll find a graded reader and read a chapter without using your dictionary. Small, consistent actions are what build new habits and lead to big changes. Thank you so much for joining me on Let's Master English. I hope this episode has given you some hope and some practical tools to quiet your mind and unlock the English that is already inside you. We love hearing your stories. Connect with us on our social media channels and tell us how you handle overthinking. Your experience could inspire someone else. Until next time, be kind to yourself, keep practicing, and keep mastering English.